All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to BAYWORK's Webinar Series, Real Talk, Moving Forward After COVID-19. Today, we will be discussing factors concerning engineering, operations, and maintenance. My name is Robert Scott, and I'm the Vice President of BAYWORK and an employee of Valley Water. We really want to engage with you today, so please use the chat feature to share your thoughts. There's an icon at the bottom of your screen labeled chat. I'm sure by now you've used this feature many times since we've been in the sheltered and shut in position and condition. And so I'm quite sure you're familiar with this. But let us know your thoughts in the chat feature. And also there's another icon at the bottom of your screen labeled Q&A. And this is where we'd like you to submit your questions. And we will be monitoring both fields, and we will address as many of your comments and questions as time allows. Some of you may not be very familiar with BAYWORK, so I'd like to say a little bit about who we are. We are a consortium of over 40 water and wastewater agencies in the Bay Area and beyond. We believe operational reliability is achieved through workforce reliability. Therefore, we make it our business to focus on strengthening the present and the future workforce. Some ways we do that is to hold events like this one and other events that allow professionals to see, hear, and touch all the great things that are happening at our agencies. On that note, we like to invite you to attend our upcoming workshop entitled The Digital Worker, which will be held on June 10th. Hope to see you there. But today, we are excited to dive into some real talk about COVID-19. I want to introduce our wonderful moderator, Michelle Gallardo. She's the HR and Risk Manager at Dublin San Ramon Services District, and she's eager to lead us in the discussion today. Michelle?
Great, thank you, Robert. I appreciate the introduction. Yes, I'm Michelle Gallardo, and I am going to present to you today the first of our three-part series on Real Talk, moving forward after COVID-19. I have served at my agency as a member of our COVID Emergency Response Task Force, and I've participated in discussions at all levels of the organization on the impacts of this pandemic on the workplace and operations. And so I'll be serving as the moderator today for the session. The agenda for today's operations and maintenance and engineering panel discussion will be to start with a quick polling question for the audience. And then we will do panel introductions, and a presentation will be given by each of our panel members. After that, we'll have a question and answer session, and then any additional questions or comments that the audience has. So we will be having today some real talk about how the pandemic has affected a few of our local Bay Area water and wastewater agencies, what we have learned from those experiences, as well as some of the ideas for how we can move forward and address the next set of challenges the pandemic emergency will bring us. You know, what will our workplaces be like now, and what should we be talking about and thinking about as we move forward and the conditions change. So some of the topics we're going to cover today are going to be return to work issues, working with contractors, working 6 feet apart, vaccinations and organizational issues. And we're going to hopefully hit on some silver linings that might have come from this process. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel to you. We have 3 esteemed professionals in our O&M and engineering. Ted Lam, who is maintenance superintendent with East Bay Municipal Utilities District. We have Dustin Bloomfield, maintenance manager from Delta Diablo, and Kevin Booker, water agency principal engineer with Sonoma Water. So we will go ahead and get started with our first presentation by Ted.
Do you want me to launch the poll, Michelle?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's do the polling question first before Ted goes ahead.
Okay, here is the poll. We ask that all of you participate, and here we go. So when do you expect your agency's staffing plan for maintenance and operations to return to normal pre-COVID? So please chime in. And I see the answers, responses coming through. The race is on. So we're still going. Okay, so we've got some participation. Yeah, it looks like everybody participated. This is
Yeah,
great.
and this is a great question because, we're hearing that, a lot of agencies are starting to ask each other, when are you guys coming back, and starting to compare notes across the board. So it'll be good for us to kind of see where everybody's at right now.
Exactly. So I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to share the results. Here we go.
Wow.
So I hope everybody can see the responses. 6 months and I don't know are tied for number 1.
Yeah, so it looks like about 50% or more, kind of within the next 3 to 6 months, which is, kind of in step with the state's notice that they'll be ending, restrictions as of the 15th of June. So I think that this is, kind of interesting results to consider as we move forward. So thank you so much, Corey.
Of course.
We'll go ahead and get started. Ted, now with your presentation.
Yes, so I've been at EBMUD about 20 years. I superintendent with 5 technical supervisors. We're responsible for 3 treatment plants, 70 pump plants, and 30 reservoirs. So I will start at the beginning for us. Around March of 2020, I looked through some of my emails, and all of a sudden, everything came to a head around March 13th, where the school shut down, affected us like you wouldn't believe. Senior management said, start planning what your staffing looks like the week after March 13th, knowing that a lot of my staff, about 50 staff, have, I'd say a third of them, 15 or so, will have kids in school. And we had to start developing, everything was on the table. An example, my mechanical shop of machinists, 9 machinists, 1 supervisor, 3 were going to be off the next week because of schooling issues with their school age kids. There was also, right after that, a couple weeks into the shelter in place, there was talk of rotating maintenance staff. Of course, we're mission critical, electricians, carpenters, machinists, painters. That do we want every one of them to be at work and possibly exposed, and also reduce social distancing at work? So we're mostly field staff, but there are places where they have to start their day and end their day. And there's a lot of collaboration throughout the day. And then management asked us, superintendent levels had a lot of decision-making responsibilities. They were asking me, what is mission essential staff? Can I send my senior admin clerk home? Are carpenters the same importance as machinists? Because they're trying to reduce in March and April for sure, 50% being at work and 50% being home, doing online training. We were making a lot of our plans as we went along, and until we got more guidance from the state and the federal level. And the emergency operations team at the district stood up around that time in middle of March. So they took this seriously. And what I did was, without anyone telling me, I had twice-a-week meetings with my direct reports, some of it in person, socially distanced, some was in Zoom, just to tell them what the latest information from the news sources and the emergency operations team was giving us, because it was a hit and miss in terms of disseminating information to staff at that point. I'd rather have them hear from me than different sources. Let's see. So example of the challenges we had. So for many months before, we had a project to shut down a portion of Chevron Richmond for a large revenue meter change out. It was going to be a week-long process in April. And it was very politically sensitive because it took us a long time to get to this point. And then management was asking me and the other superintendent over the plumbers, hey, can you get this work done still with all these social distancing and safety protocols in place? And Shelly Frank is the other superintendent of the plumbers. I have machinists involved with cranes and serious pipe work. We thought about it. We knew there was some pressure to get it done and not change the plan because Chevron had put pressure on us to do this, and it was going to be week long. So we thought, hey, we can do this. And here's an example of what we had to deal with in the first few weeks of the shelter in place. There's a mix of my machinists and some plumbers in the outskirts of the Richmond Chevron plant. We placed in some large pipes and mag meters. 6 foot distancing, not really, but we were outside, so we felt it was, low risk. You had to coordinate. Things just change in the field. You just can't just email each other. You got to be out there and seeing what it is. And because parts are, the drawings you have at the start are going to be different than what the actual site conditions are when you dig up and expose things. So that was within a few weeks of the start of the shelter in place. And I know I have about 4 minutes left. And along the way, while this was happening, I was asked to look at all my 5 shops and determine what was the highest priority work, because there was concern that some of our folks might be exposed to the COVID-19, and how do we plan for that? There's all these plans in place, so we had to look at our workload and look at our highest priority, and what would that minimum amount of staffing would be necessary in the electrical shop, the instrument shop, the mechanical shop, the carpenter shop, the paint shop. Just for example, we have about 20 generators that we test every month, and that work requires 2 electricians. And our generators are what keeps us reliable during PSPS, during weird PG&E outage issues, earthquakes. So I figured that my staff of 11 electricians, I would need minimally to get that high critical work done, 5 of them. And so that was part of the consideration when we rotated people in and out of work and had the people at home doing online training of various sorts. And then we rolled in a few months later into PSPS, the PG&E Public Safety Power Shutoff. Those are long hours, and I really needed almost all my electricians on board. But thank goodness most of them can work out of their trucks. They have district supplied iPhones, district supplied 2-in-1 laptops. And we work with the unions too, because we have a strong union presence here. And we were, from the get-go in March, we were bringing them into our emergency operations team to let them hear what the senior management team was debating and provide input. So they would get, so their members would get the same information I was giving my employees. That increased trust, and they felt confident that what we're asking to do, even this weird environment, that we had thought it through. So I'm going to wrap it up and say that lessons learned for me during the first few months was that, 1, information is coming at you fast and furious, and a lot of them is contradictory. 2, don't fall behind on reading up the information. And 3, sift through the most critical relevant information for your direct reports and pass quickly to your supervisors so they can start planning and doing what ifs. And because they have the experience and skills to implement the change, they have the most credibility with their staff, like the electrical supervisor. If he was on board with the program, his electricians were going to be on board with the program. And get 4, get their feedback and what works or doesn't work, because some of this stuff that came up initially were silly. And, you know, I had to float it by them anyway, and they told me it was silly. We can't do it that way. We can't not be, you know, if you, you know, some of the work for checking out testing generators, you got to be right next to each other. And of course, I got to pass that information on a regular basis to my manager, who's in the emergency operations team as the planning section chief. And this loop of information flow continues on a daily basis, practically. And that was my experience the first few months of 2020.
Thank you so much, Ted, for sharing that. And it does sound like, you know, the information loop and that flow was critical at the early stages for you guys. And then also you mentioned the mobile workforce being kind of a benefit or a silver lining to be able to respond. So that's kind of an interesting observation and going into, you know, coming out of this, right? So thanks for sharing that, experience. So we're going to go ahead now. We're going to switch over to Dustin. Dustin is with Delta Diablo, and he's going to give you a short presentation now.
Yeah, Dustin Bloomfield. I'm the maintenance manager here at Delta Diablo. I manage the mechanical, electrical, controls, warehouse, and collection staff for the district. One of the topics that I'd like to talk about was when this all happened, I had a lot of guys retiring, and I had some new hires. So that was at first got put on hold about 4 or 5 months into it. And with our workload being very high, we decided to basically come up with a plan to hire using Zoom, Teams, and then at that point, with being, you know, having technical staff and everything, it was how to do a hands-on. So at first we did it in our first interview was via Zoom, and then what we did was which was your standard. You know, I used outside agencies, and we brought them in, and we did these Zoom meetings. The first couple of times we did it, it was challenging. We had some of the people that are applying that were doing it off their phones. We had some technical issues with it cutting out, and it was fun. But you know, we got through that, and then what we did was we set up a teams meeting for the second round interview, and our second round interview was more of a technical interview, and we used internals, like one of them was for an electrician. We used our lead electrician to do a technical interview, so it was basically taking place for what we would normally have as a hands-on. And it was it's worked really well so far. We've hired 2 through that system of doing that, and both of them went really well. We've got 2 new employees that are doing great. It was pretty cool, I guess you'd say, to see that, you know, we could work our way through the system, and we had a proctor that was sitting on the interview panel that could really technically see when the questions were answered right, you know, and not have to physically see the person doing the work, you know. So it worked really well. The last set of interviews we did was for a mechanics position, and at that point this was later on, this was just only the last 2 months. We ended up changing it back and doing a hands-on, but we used plexiglass and 6-foot distancing. We had, because it's a mechanics position, so some of the hands-on was with welding and some of that kind of stuff. So we ended up doing like, you know, with like a welding hood and that kind of stuff, a lot of cleaning in between and disinfecting. And we had a lot of stuff where it's more of disposable, to be able to make sure everybody was safe and everything. And we split the proctoring up from everything from putting some of it outside to some in the shop and some in the back of our warehouse. And we moved them all around so everybody was separated, and then we timed it so that basically they could do their rounds and nobody came in second contact or that kind of stuff. So yeah, so we've hired, I think, 4 employees through that process. Very tough, but like I said, it has worked out. I think that that's the silver lining, I guess you'd say. You know, we've gotten really good employees from it, and they're doing great. I think some of the major issues were probably we're just, you know, getting, usually, you know, we go out with our sister agencies and getting, you know, having availability to have managers or supervisors sitting on oral panels and that kind of stuff. It was kind of tough, you know. Everybody was real shorthanded, and so that was probably one of the toughest things was finding available supervisors, managers, or maintenance staff that we could even have sit on these Zoom meetings. But that seems to be lightening up a little bit better. This last one, we had real good pick of outside agencies and stuff. So it's good. It seems like things are opening up a little bit. Yeah, I think that was it for me, right? Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting. We've all had to learn to adapt to online interviewing, which was a little clunky at the start, to say the least. You know, like you said, people getting cut off and whatnot. But did your agency notice a difference in the quality of the hires from the processes you were, you know, running virtually through technical training or technical questions versus the hands-on practical exercises?
You know what? I don't think so. And we've really gotten, it's worked really well. I was really nervous about it. I think hands-on are really important because we kind of, you know, you also get fit, which is important, you know. So a lot of times when we do hands-on, I have the proctors for hands-on are the guys that are going to be working with, you know. So fit is real important too, you know. So a lot of times those guys can have the feeling, you know, so we like to hear that, you know, to make sure that they are going to fit well with the rest of the group and everything and stuff. And you know, it worked really well. We've got 4 new guys. They're doing great. And yeah, I can't complain really.
Yeah, that's really great to hear that it worked out, you know, despite the logistical challenges. So thank you, Dustin, for your presentation. We're going to go ahead and then now switch over to Kevin, and he's going to give you a presentation now from his agency.
Oh yeah, so hi, my name's Kevin Booker. I work with Sonoma Water. Just a real quick overview of Sonoma Water. We provide, we wholesale potable water to about 600,000 people in Marin and Sonoma counties. We operate or manage 9 small wastewater treatment facilities in Sonoma County, and they range from an average dry weather flow of 2,500 to 3 MGD. In terms of wastewater, they're all still pretty small. And then we also have flood control responsibilities as well throughout the county. And so today, what I'm going to talk about is a couple of events that happened at our agency, really sort of towards the early part of the pandemic, and then sort of, you know, event that happened towards the end of the not the end of the pandemic, end of the year, end of 2020. And then just talk about on some things that we've learned, you know, during the course of the year. So one of the events, and one thing I want to say as well is, we've encountered the same thing that Ted and Dustin have at their agencies. You know, we've ran into some of those same issues at our agencies, and I'm sure you've ran into them at yours too. But so one of the events at our agency is we had a site visit with contractors on site, and obviously we had staff on site there too, and they met. And what happened was, sort of a day later, one of the persons that attended turned out tested positive. And I think we've all have seen the process that occurs once someone has tested positive, and then there's just, from my point, there was just a slew of emails coming out trying to find out who was on site, when were they on site. And it wasn't just that day. It's, it was a day, it was a 2-week period, a 45-day period. And from the engineering side, it's like, okay, I got to go track the engineers, and we have some engineer techs that's in my group as well, and have to go track them. And we had to get that information, get it to HR. HR, obviously, with the notifications required by the state, started notifying everyone. And it just turns out that one of the persons that showed up at the time didn't know, obviously got tested afterwards, but one person was impacted. One additional person actually was impacted by that event. And for us, it's not only our staff that we have to worry about, right? Too, we have to worry about the contractors as well. So that was one of the first ones early on. And it was, from my point of view, just scary in the sense of how, when you think about it, how rapidly it can spread without really even thinking about anything. And that stuck in my mind for the longest. And after that, I was always cautious with the people in my group about, when you go on site, when you do in-person meetings, have your mask and stay the 6 feet apart as best you can. And I also told my staff is, if you're at a meeting like that and someone's not adhering to it, you are welcome to leave. I said, it really doesn't matter who's at that meeting. If you don't feel safe, go. And for me, I wanted to give my staff that ability to, if they just did not feel comfortable, they can leave. It didn't happen, but I just wanted them to know that. All right, so now we fast forward to November. We had a consultant, we have a consultant on board to help us with establishing our asset management program. And we're going to have a site visit. They were going to come on site to one of our wastewater treatment facilities. They were also bringing subs on to the site, obviously with our staff, and they were going to walk around and do an assessment of the treatment plant. And so I had a conversation with the consultant about, okay, well, what are you guys doing to prepare your staff and the consultants for coming, onto our property? What training are you doing? So they gave me actually a copy of their presentation that they run through with their staff and with their subs about, protocols, COVID protocols. And so I took that and I pared it down to what I thought, we need for our staff. And 2 days before the assessment, I held a meeting for the staff that I thought would be on site and said, okay, here's our protocol, and just went through it and just laid it out. And actually we went through the assessment and everything turned out fine. There was no, obviously there was no reported cases of COVID, which was nice. Assessment went well. And I was like, wow, it's funny is before it, I felt nervous. After I felt a lot of relief, which was nice. And so that's sort of something that, definitely I learned over the course of the years, just to be cautious about, when you have people on site. And as an engineer, we're sort of not like with Dustin and Ted, where their staff really have to go out. The engineers, at least in my group, a lot of them, they can work from home. They do go on sites, periodically and meet with the mechanics and so forth. But it's not like where they're out in the field all the time. And we do have staff like that. And one of the things I did too recently is I talked to our construction inspector, or he's an engineer over that group. And I asked him, I was like, well, how did you deal with it? How did you, obviously you have your inspectors are all at these sites. And he's like, well, actually, we followed our protocol. He goes, surprisingly, all of the contractors have very similar protocols. They follow the health and safety protocols. He said, actually, other than that one event that I just described, he goes, it's been actually working really well. And I thought, oh, that was nice. I wasn't aware, but that was really nice that our protocols along with the contractors really lined up, and that things have been going well, over the course of the year. And we had a lot of projects going on, well, same as Ted did. For me, what's come out of this and what I see right now is I think we're always learning and things are always changing. And Michelle hit on it, and and I had a call today about it as well, is, okay, so that initial reaction to the pandemic, we all went through it and we're going through it. Now that whole come back to work topic is starting to come into play. And I think, for me, for my group, and actually, for Sonoma Water as well, is whether it's the Sonoma Water, was the division, whether it's my group section I'm in, I think we still have to stay diligent about, what we do, and diligent about the health and safety protocols that are in place right now. And I'm sure we've all seen it, is, it's been a year, well, it's been over a year, right? And it's that amount of time you do start to relax a little bit. And as soon as you do, I just had another instance where I got a blast of emails, a couple of weeks ago, right? And it's because we, for the lack of it, weren't quite following all the safety, health and safety protocols are in place. And so I think the lesson learned is just to stay diligent with what's going on. I think we're about to turn the corner. The way I always view it, as I was in Hawaii, and obviously we're walking up one of the volcanoes. We went through one of the like lava tubes up to the top, and we get right in the middle and went pitch black. And I don't get scared of that kind of stuff, right? But I can feel my heart. It was just started pounding because I could not see anything. I could hear my daughter, couldn't see anything. And we kept walking, and then the light just starts to, you can see a light down the way. Okay, I think I'm there. And the more closer you get to it, right, the brighter and brighter it gets, so that you're at the end. I think we're there with the pandemic. I think it's not a bright light, but we all see the light, and that we all should really just stay diligent about what we're doing. And the thing that I always try to pass on to my daughters is just don't think about you. Think about others that you come in contact, and how that can really just spread if we're not paying attention. So I'm not sure where I'm at in time, because I wasn't checking time.
No, you've brought up some great points, Kevin, and I think that a lot of us can also relate in terms of working with the contractors, right? Because while your experience, you found that some contractors had very similar response protocols in place, that we also learned in some cases they weren't a match, right? And that we had to kind of figure out, how we work through that. So actually that leads to one of the first questions I had for the panel, was that, has there been a noticeable change in how your organization interacts with vendors and contractors? And is this now an opportunity to consider changes? And whoever wants to take that one first.
Yeah, and I can say, just based on, again, discussions with our construction inspection, I don't think we've changed our process. And I think that's because we've had a lot of success with our contractors about following the protocols. And I'll speak for him. He's okay with me speaking for him. He's probably not, but I'm going to speak for him anyway. I would think that based on just that discussion, I think we would stick with what we're doing, because it's working, and we haven't really seen any issues with it to date.
So
Yeah.
for EBMUD engineering, I'm not in the engineering department, but for the most part, I think their meetings with consultants have been virtual from the start of this. And I've been involved with those big design meetings now virtually. On the operations and maintenance side, where I'm in, now we have a major capital construction or any meeting with a contractor out in the field, we email them our protocols and make sure that they're aware of it before the actual meeting, and they're going to enforce it. So that has worked out, and we're not going to change that.
And we're a lot like Ted. We have like a gatekeeper, our safety manager. She makes sure she reviews everything with the contractors before they're on site, and everything's signed. So it's real clear, decisive, district policies and how we're following the CDC guidelines. And so it's real clear. And then all staff knows that at any time, they see somebody not following the rules, the contractor could be red tagged and the job could be stopped or whatever we need to do to make sure that they're following the rules. We have we have essential employees and we don't have a lot of them, which are operations and maintenance staff that are all over the plant, sites, and we have a lot of projects going on right now. So for them to take out, maybe possibly one and then contact trace, 2 or 3 other operators, that could be a whole day's worth of, that could be all our whole staff that day, all our operators at one time. So it's real important to make sure that they're following the guidelines.
I want to add something real quick, if I could, Michelle. At this point in time, we have about our workforce is about 2,000 people, and we've had 84, 85 employees tested positive. Out of that 84, 85, 2 have contracted COVID from fellow coworkers. Only 2.
Yeah, and the pandemic hasn't been declared over yet, right? So it's still in the community, and we're being notified that it's continued at some level. So I think vigilance is important to continue, even though we are kind of entering that phase back and talking about returning to work. And with that concept, I have a kind of an interesting question for you. Is a quick return or a slow phase in preferred, and why? And I don't know if that's been discussed at your agencies, but
we're doing a slow phase in, and the discussion is just because, like you just said, it's still out there, and bringing the staff in all at once and would take a lot of, I guess there'd be a lot of changes. We'd probably have to do a lot of, like we've done a lot of the panels and put different staff in different offices. So with that, we would put in like, let's say our finance department, where we've split them up into offices that were normally used by other staff members. And now we'd have to put them back into an area where they were in cubicles and all in one office. So, and that it's not possible right now. So we would definitely have to phase it in slowly.
Kevin, how about your agency?
So for our agency, the O&M side really never left. They've been, they never were off. I don't want to say off, worked from home. Obviously they can't, but for that, just lack of a better way to define an admin. So, our other design engineers, our drafting section, all those, I think we are starting the discussion about how to bring everyone back. And I'm not sure if it's Ted just mentioned, we also have to, confer with the unions as well. So I think the discussions have started. I've had the discussion with my group just to try to get individuals' opinions as to what they would like to see.
Yeah. So O&M is about 900 people. So we've really never, other than the first few weeks, we've never been off work. So it's the other groups that are been telecommuting for the most part. The supervisors of the other administrative engineering groups, they come into work once or twice a week, I think, generally. But their associate engineers, admin staff are mostly telecommuting because we want to keep the main building downtown 20%, 25% occupied at this point. But there is talk of middle June, late June, phasing it in incrementally.
Yeah, and I think that's generally the sense too, right? That being thoughtful about how we go back, since we dispersed so quickly, and trying to make sure that while we have the time, we can take that time to be thoughtful about how we come back is a good thing. I want to talk too about vaccinations a little bit with you. So, how comfortable are people discussing and sharing vaccination status with one another in the workplace? This has become kind of a topic, right? And I know it's different for, maybe a big agency or a smaller agency. So interesting to get your perspectives on that.
I'll start. From O&M's perspective, here in my group, my division's 150 people. We're all eager to get vaccinated. Everyone was inquiring early on because we were classified as 1C in terms of the priority of getting our shots. And somehow we became 1B in early March, and everyone just rushed, and they were very open. The majority were open to sharing that they got their shots.
And so for, I'm also, I would say that the people that have gotten their shots have been open about it. My percent is different than Ted's. I think it looks like if you're just looking at just my group, I'm a group of a little over 20 in maintenance, and it's probably maybe 5% that want to go get the vaccination, and the rest are not ready to do that yet. I don't think they're, saying no, they're not going to get it, but there's a couple of those too. But there's definitely some of them that I'd say the large percentage of them have not done it yet.
Yeah, and at our agency, we really don't ask. Obviously, you can volunteer. From what I have noticed, it's those that you work around a lot will share, and then there are others that have received it but don't share. And then, like Dustin, there's obviously a group that's saying no. And so at our agency, it's some people are just willing to say, yeah, hey, I got it, or and others are not, and it's sort of a mix.
Yeah.
I work, we're not mandating vaccination, but if you've got vaccinated, your second shot to record to HR.
Interesting. Is anyone, Dustin or Kevin, are your agencies mandating vaccinations this time?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I haven't, from the area here, I haven't heard of anyone doing that yet, but there's definitely lots of discussion, right, about whether you can or not. Also,
there's a question here. Excuse me.
Oh, you got a question.
There's a question about vaccinations. Since we're talking about it, it says,
Sure.
Are folks looking at June 15th and or 80% vaccination as triggers for bringing remote workers back to on site? If not, what are the triggers? And you may not have no response to that, but I wanted to state the question.
So we're not, vaccinations has not been discussed for the reason, but what we've done is just followed CDC guidelines and then also the county's guidelines. So the June 15th date, I think, is just what they've heard, for the state for opening and getting coming out of the tier or whatever tier or something, whatever. So.
I would say for our agency that, of course, we're not mandating now, but the message has been consistent that it could be mandated depending on what information flows that about people who self-report their vaccination, what that percentage is down the road.
Yeah, and I think we're like Dustin. We're in sort of respect tied with the county in terms of our board of directors and the board of supervisors. And my understanding is we're developing that information, but we're also waiting to see how the county what they come up with.
There's another question here, Michelle, that says, have anyone of your agencies taken actions to improve ventilations or add air purifiers?
I'll answer that first. So yeah, we have. So there's, for admin staff, they put air purifiers in every office. And then for just the buildings themselves, they changed the way they ran the HVAC system to instead of a recert, they do fresh air. So, and then we changed our frequency of filtration changes and made sure that we I think they're doing them twice. Filtration PMs are now twice as often as they were doing before. So.
Yeah, and I'm for our agency, I believe we have, but I'm not 100% sure.
Our largest building downtown Oakland is a 9-story building, usually have 800 people. It's been like I said, 20% occupied right now. And we are wrapping up a multi-million-dollar capital project because the age of our building was built in the late 90s, that they're changing the HVAC controls more efficient, and there is more ability to refresh air from the outside, and we can control it better. And there was a discussion today with union members, with senior management, that we can, in certain conference room, we can refresh the air like 8 times an hour in the certain conference rooms. And those we have more flexibility now for that headquarters building.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and these are all items as part of talking about return to work, right? We have to think of all the logistics and bringing more people back into office spaces. When you're talking internally with your agencies, who's involved in the return to work strategies? How is the input being gathered by employees at your agencies?
We have a COVID task force that was created from our executive team. I think so. We have a risk manager, a safety manager, a resource recovery director. I think our engineering director. I think that's the task force, and then they relay the messages down from from there to the managers, and then for the most part, changes are just any kind of changes are made from the manager's level down. So.
Yeah, and I'm not involved. A friend of mine, he's on the task force. He's in accounting. We know, sort of like Dustin, our risk. We have emergency manager. I know he's on it. Obviously, HR is on it, and then some of our division managers are on it as well.
We stood up our emergency operations team like in March of 2020, and soon thereafter they brought one person from each of the unions into the emergency operations team recurring meetings. So there are plans developed at the senior management level. Emergency operations team, HR managers is on the emergency operations team, and then they share the draft for comment through the union leadership. And then they have Q&A, lots of Q&A, and then changes. But at that point in time, we're finalizing a return to work plan. Actually, it should be done in a couple weeks. So a lot of involvement, and as someone who supervises field staff, I get to see it as a union member and as a middle manager. So I provide input too.
That's great. And just wondering, do any of your agencies, have they put out any type of surveys to employees or their focus groups? I mean, Ted, you kind of explained a little bit that's kind of happening there, but Dustin and Kevin, is that something your agencies consider?
So we have not put out a survey. I haven't seen a survey yet. I know they are working on information to put out to staff, but I'm not aware where they're at in that whole process, though.
Yeah, and so I mean, emails are going out, on pretty much on a constant basis from the team or the task force that we have, and they it's been a kind of like an open policy. I mean, you can also it's if somebody has a question or a concern or anything, it's phone calls and emails or any text messages. I mean, it's been pretty open to when the door's been wide open to that. If there's especially any concern because of the situation, and then they've been really pretty helpful too. There's some people that have, they're taking care of the elderly parents, or they had their kids where their kids were home, and that wasn't the plan for them too. So they had to be, so the agency worked real well with, seems like, with everyone to make sure that we kept families, you know, that are taking care of their kids and their family members and that kind of stuff. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's important, I think, because, you know, people do have various different situations, people living in different counties commuting in, and they're in their different tiers and different situations, right? So how it impacts your organization in terms of return to work could have varying effects on staff. So that's great to hear that there's, you know, some ability for people to kind of voice back where they might have concerns, and having policymakers being able to get that information and considering for return to work. You know, one last question I wanted to make sure to ask the panel is, you know, with the pandemic, we talk about silver linings, and wanted to know from your agency, you know, what were the silver linings that you saw come out of this? I mean, there was a lot of challenges, there were a lot of things to work around, but the silver linings are things that we want to consider, and we're moving forward on things, you know, we might be able to either maintain, keep around, or modify to have something a little bit better in the end. So maybe Ted, starting with you, what were some of the silver linings?
A common thing I think we'll hear is that virtual meetings work. The extra tools we have that came out pandemic worked in terms of Zoom and whatnot. The other thing too is we were able to test our emergency operations team in a real life setting for a year at a time, where it was sustained communications from the emergency operations team was very effective. We've done that before, and we found that it working for other emergencies before has helped us now.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll probably have to, you know, tag along with Ted. It's just, you know, to see everybody work together, you know, it's that same thing. We've seen it in the past, and and I've been around for a little while, so I've seen it. It's just everybody starts pulling their weight, and, you know, and even outside their, you know, when a lot of people, you know, we had a lot of engineering staff going home and that kind of stuff. And so, you know, we're getting the email, you know, can maintenance guy go do this for us and check on a project or do that kind of stuff? And we did, and everybody worked together, and everybody, I think, was really appreciative. And I think for us, the major silver lining is that a lot of us didn't go home. I think there's a 45 to 50 of the staff members stayed, you know, and became essential. And we had to be here. And so at the end of it, it's been about a year and so many months. And we've had one COVID exposure. One person had got it. It was outside of it wasn't from an agency, and nobody else was affected from it. So I think our procedures and stuff were working, because the person did not affect anybody else that was contracted with COVID. So I think that's the biggest thing. You know, we kept a bunch of people safe, and we kept working and kept the place running.
It's great to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would echo what Dustin just said. Our O&M staff just kept going, didn't miss a beat. I think for us, and we all experienced it, right? We went from 0 to 100 with, I think Ted might have said it, I forget the date, but as an example, right? March 15th, you were noticed, and March 16th, everyone was at home, at least admin staff, right? And I think our IT staff did a great job at keeping us up and running, and you know, teams showed up and just really, you know,
Shout out to IT, right?
exactly. Obviously, I don't. All I know is, I call Jens or, hey, I can't get on, and boom, it's up, right? And so obviously they obviously did a lot of work behind the scenes to keep us going, right? Hiccups, maybe some minor ones, but from going at that speed of, you know, the majority of the people are in the office to half of them are at home, and now they're all coming in, VPN in, and yeah, I think our IT did just a great job in keeping us just up and running with everything going on. So
Yeah, I would echo that too. We definitely have the value of IT in mind through getting us through this. So So thank you, Ted, Kevin, Dustin, for all of your great stories and input. It's much appreciated, and we're all going through this and trying to, keep things top of mind when we're planning our return to work. And so we appreciate the perspective from operations and maintenance and engineering as we move through this. So our next session is going to be in a couple weeks, and that will be with our HR panel. And so we will have 3 professionals at that time, and have some question and answer sessions as well from them on this same topic. So we hope you join us for that session as well.